let me welcome you to the fourth plenary session of this day. Since Friday, we've been engaged in discussions on a range of European defense capacity, defense capability questions, and we will now turn to defense procurement and the relationship between national security, defense industry, and of course, it has been, as we have heard already a couple of times in today's conversation, yesterday as well, it has been a major task for European NATO and EU members to transform their defense procurement processes, to develop and field capabilities faster, a task that I think many would agree remains to be completed. It has been important to think about the role of defense industry for deterrence and defense, and in all that, governments had to explain the renewed urgency and importance attached to defense, sometimes, of course, in competition with other national priorities. And often the attention turns to the multinational level, of course, including the EU level, to see how collaboration and capability development can be encouraged, incentivized politically, and increasingly also financially. And this morning, somebody mentioned smart defense, and there are a few veterans in the room who will remember the original days of the smart defense conversation. And I'm delighted that we have, again, a very relevant group of speakers for this plenary session who will have their own perspectives on this theme, but I think their remarks are likely to complement each other very nicely. We will, in a second, begin with Hanno Pevkur, the Minister of Defense of Estonia. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. We will then turn to Athanasios Ntokos, the National Security Advisor of Greece, and if I may say, also a good friend of the ISS. Thanos, thank you for being here. And last but not least, we will hear from Jiri Sedivy, the Chief Executive of the European Defence Agency. Jiri can, of course, combine, because of his experience, the EU level, but also you have that experience on the national level before. So they will speak and offer their thoughts, and after their speeches, we will have our question and answers session. So we will run in a very similar way as we have run the other sessions. So, Minister, if I may ask you to take the podium and deliver your remarks. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I will really would like to thank IAS to come to Prague and to invite also such a group of people here to discuss on these important topics. Nevertheless, I had a very beautiful speech prepared for myself, and thought that I will also read this speech, but then I decided to go free ride and talk about some of the challenges I see when we talk about defense procurements and what we're facing at the moment. So I believe that, the main message is that when we talk about challenges in defense procurements, then we have to overcome this small challenge called BMT challenge. So I just made it up. So this BMT challenge for me, it means that we have to talk about bureaucracy, money, and time. And first, when we talk about bureaucracy, then this is probably one of the biggest challenges in defense procurement in Europe and in the free world, because when we want to establish a factory or some ammunition production in Europe, then it probably takes, in normal terms, 5 to 7 years. When you take all the planning process, all the licenses, all the approvals, that by that time the war is over. To have the first shell coming from the factory, so we tried to catch the moment in Estonia, and then we started the defense industry park in Estonia with a special planning process, looking at these regulations what we have in Europe. So we started this process on 15th of February, and the plan is to finish in August next year, so in around 17 months. But that means that, you know, we have to overcome a lot of different challenges, because normally it takes 6 to 7 years only for the planning process. So anyway, when we take all the licensing, the same. When we take all the standards what we have in our systems, we have 155. Yes, we have 155 for howitzer, but we cannot use the same rounds in different types of howitzers. So the standards are there, but in reality they are not functioning. So still, again, the bureaucracy. We have limitations. So we all heard about limitations using the long-range weapons in Ukraine, that you need to have the approval. But we have also the limitations inside of Europe. So when you want to have let's say we have a case in Baltics, because when we take Ukraine, then the battlefield in Ukraine is around 110,000 square kilometers. This is almost the size of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. When you look at the map of Ukraine, it seems that it's a small piece of Ukraine, but in reality, it's almost the full Baltic countries. And now when we want to go with our HIMARS, we have Lockheed Martin here, and I had a beautiful discussion with them, but nevertheless, when we want to go today with Estonian HIMARS to Latvia, we cannot go. We cannot go because of the crypto keys, because of the license limitations, etc. So this is stupid, sorry to say that, but how we can fight when we cannot go 50 kilometers above the border? But Russians are not looking into these limitations. Or we want to establish a new training field, and then all the environment organizations are coming to us and saying that, no, you cannot do anything here because we have one eagle. But I cannot put a sign to the border and say to the Russians that don't go there because we have an eagle there. So these are the challenges what we face. So this is about the B, so bureaucracy. So now M, money. We have the situation that 23 countries of NATO are investing 2% to defense. Yes, it is good that this number is now bigger than it was a year ago. Yes, by average in NATO, we have more than 2%. But is it enough? No. No, because when we take last 25 years, in Europe, defense spendings have increased 43%. 25 years, 43%. The same time, China, 816%. Russia, 592%. And this is the answer to us. So when we, and this doesn't take into account the inflation. So 43% without inflation. So we are not investing enough into our defense. And when you want to have the procurements, when you want to have the capabilities, you cannot do that without money. You can ask from any industry companies here presented. They cannot invest into new capabilities to ramp up the production without the new contracts. When you don't have the long-term contracts, you will not have new capabilities. And T, time. So this is linked to the bureaucracy, but we do not have time. We still have a bit of time. And to be honest, you know, it's very difficult to say that, you know, when Russia is, or if Russia is challenging NATO. But there is an intention. And we need to be sending a very clear deterrence message that they don't think even about it, but they are thinking at the moment. Because their goal is not to take NATO territory-wise. Their goal is to show that NATO is not functioning. How they can do that? It's enough for them to get one small piece of Romania or Poland or Estonia or Latvia, And when the Article 5 is not then functioning timely, then they have achieved their goal to show that NATO is not functioning. So time is of essence, and time is critical for us to be ready to have more capabilities, and then also that we have to think about the future. So very quickly, as I had only 7 minutes around, yes, so 1 minute to wrap up. So there are solutions, of course. So first, start from the beginning, from the last, or from the center, money. We need to invest more. 2% is not enough. So is it 2.5 what we can get from Hague, or is it 3%? But the point is that you need to have more money, and more money to capabilities. So this is why we offered to NATO countries ACDC, and it's not a band, ACDC, it's the Capability Development Initiative. So we need to invest into capabilities. When you have the capabilities, then you have also the more defense readiness. Secondly, joint procurements. I hope that Jiri will talk about the joint procurements, but you know, the point is that when we're not doing the joint procurements for CV90s or the ammunition, then we will end up in the situation that we have the capabilities, but we don't have the interoperability, we don't have the interchangeability. So joint procurements, and also joint certification. And thirdly, of course, we also need, when we talk about money, European Union initiatives. We know that there is an initiative from Ursula von der Leyen about the 500 billions, and we strongly support that. And of course, it's a challenge for all of us in Europe to agree how it will be financed. But we cannot wait for the MFF new period, because this starts in 28, so we don't have time for 28, sorry. So, and last but not least, when we just try to think before going to the discussion that how we will win the possible war, first, of course, we do everything to avoid the war, but when there is a real war in European territory, then how we win? First, you have to have the better equipment, so this is why we need the procurements and acquisitions. Secondly, you need to have better training, so you need to be better than as your opponent, as your adversary. And thirdly, of course, you know, you need to be more accurate and reach longer. So this is again about the development, about the R&D and all that. So I really do hope that we have some more time to discuss in the panel. But now my 8.5 minutes are over. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you very much. A very clear statement. Your bureaucracy, money, time, a triptych, I'm sure, will animate lots of discussion. And if I may simplify a little bit, less bureaucracy, more money, a realization that we're almost out of time should animate our actions. And you offered your thoughts on what some of the pathways forward would be. Thank you very much for that. Athanasios, may I ask you to take the floor? Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, many thanks to the organizers for the invitation. You know, Bastian, I joined I became a student member of the IISS back in 1987. Still Tavistock days, I'm sure Francois and John remember fondly that period of the Institute. At the time, it was hard to imagine that I would be invited to be a speaker at a high-level IISS event. But as they say, life is full of surprises, and some of them are pleasant ones. Now, I would like to briefly present the Greek experience in procurement and then take it a level up and speak about European problems and possible solutions. Now, Greece is atypical in several ways. It has been spending at least 3% for its defense for many years. We do have a system of full conscription, and now the Minister of Defense is looking for ways to introduce voluntary service for women. And then because of our geography and threat assessment, which is not, and we have been developing all three branches of the armed forces, land forces, Air Force and Navy, almost equally, which is rather unusual for a country with Greece's size. Also, a major difference is that whereas many other European countries enjoyed the peace dividend because they chose to, we went through what we call a lost decade because of the economic crisis, which left us another legacy, which is a very inflexible procurement law, which gives a lot of emphasis on transparency, which is good, but not enough emphasis on speed, which is problematic. So this is something we need to change. Now, what we have in common with other European countries of our size is that economies of scale do not work in our favor. We're good buyers, but not big buyers. We have been struggling to integrate startups in our defense ecosystem. Now, we recently created a Center for Defense Innovation, but then how to move fast with startups before someone else buys the product or the company itself. We have been struggling with that. And then also, which again I think is a European problem, how to convince young talented people to work for state companies. Obviously, we cannot compete with the private sector in terms of salaries and opportunities. Now, so to move to the European level, my starting position is that if you don't have a seat around the table, then you're probably part of the menu. So in a time of intense geopolitical competition, I would very much like the EU or Europe to have a seat around the table. And of course, when it comes to defense procurement and defense industry, we only have to do 5 simple tasks. Integrate innovative technologies, procure faster, buy cheaper, improve the follow-on support, and then maintain security of supply. It's as simple as that. But of course, there are several obstacles. If intelligence services are at the hard core of state sovereignty, then defense planning and defense industry is a close second. So when we talk about somehow synchronizing our defense procurement programs so that we can take advantage of economies of scale, well, it sounds nice, but how do you implement that? And also, it's a good idea to try to buy European whenever you can, but very often non-European products are either cheaper or more advanced technologically or more quickly available. And then, of course, most European economies are either in recession or not growing fast enough. So, there's heavy competition about available funds. And there are so many other needs. There's also, as mentioned in the IISS report, competition with the non-defense sector of the raw materials. And of course, we do rely on non-friendly countries for some of those rare materials. Now, what are the solutions? Maybe wrong word. Some ideas and recommendations. First of all, I heard the 45-day development cycle that Ukraine has developed. It gave me a headache. I don't think we can get anywhere near that. Of course, they are at war. It's a different environment, and time runs differently under the circumstances. But we can certainly do much better than we're doing today. But first question is, who's we? Is it EU? Is it NATO? Both of them? And then if that's the right answer, can we somehow involve our technologically sophisticated friends in the Indo-Pacific, countries like Japan and South Korea and Australia, or other friendly countries in the Middle East. Would that be a possibility? And then I think it's about time to move beyond theological debates about European strategic autonomy, find or agree to a definition and a level of ambition that will work for us, make sure that it's not undermining NATO, but this is something we have to do. We can name it differently, but it's about time to agree on that. Well, it was already mentioned, weapons have become too expensive. And it's obvious that we don't need Ferraris for every task. Volvos, Audis, and Peugeot can do many of those jobs much more cheaply. Then we have to become a bit more ambitious in terms of European projects, what I would call flagship projects, high symbolic but also operational value. My Prime Minister, along with the Polish Prime Minister, presented an idea on a air defense shield. One can think of other flagship projects like UAVs and USVs, space, a sixth generation fighter aircraft, a new European corvette or frigate. I know there's the so-called Eurocorvette project, which it's a nice idea. Here, my favorite example of how not to do things and why we need more defense consolidation, defense industry consolidation, is the Greek frigate procurement program. Now, there were 7 companies that submitted their offers. 6 of them were European ones. And all the ships were great ships. But we can't go on much longer with so many types. At some point, we need to consolidate that will help us in so many obvious ways. So flagship projects is something we need to look at. Then I think General Bato mentioned that we need to change the laws, the policies, and the culture. I don't have to tell you which one is the most difficult one to change. Culture. It will take a lot of time and effort. Then we also need secure supply chains. Terms like glocalization and friend sourcing come to mind, but then we need to act on those, not just discuss them. And I guess my final point in this introductory comment is that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of good ideas in the Draghi report, in the Niinisto report, and in so many other good reports and papers. All it takes is sufficient political goodwill. Now, problem is if political will. If political will was an animal, it would belong to the category of endangered species. So I'm sorry, I'm not too optimistic here. I hope I'm wrong on that. But there are a number of things we need to do as quickly as possible. The challenges are out there, and time is not on our side. But it's not a lost battle, not yet. Thank you.
Thanos, thank you very much for starting out with the Greek experience, and I think it's interesting how you described a transparent but slow and inflexible procurement process, and then moving on to the ideas about solutions, the idea of European flagship projects around which industry could coalesce and national interests could perhaps coalesce. So that leads us naturally to the European Defence Agency, since you're meant to have the solutions, Jiri. So over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Bastian, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, and a great pleasure to be here under the umbrella of the BISS Great Conference. And I also actually became a student member, but it was in 1994, when I was studying at King's War Studies, and my referee, or whatever it was, guarantor, it was Lawrence Friedman, my professor of strategy. So great to be here, really, very much honored and happy now. I will start with outlining some sort of a context, and then I will try to address questions why, how, and what in terms of joint procurement. And the context is clear indeed. Russian war, aggression against Ukraine, and the rather surprise, actually, for many of us, what high-intensity, now already attritional warfare means in terms of very high and fast level of consumption of military material and ammunition, especially, and the impact on our stocks, and the indeed also recognition of the fact that and I'm speaking and focusing on European Union, that the European defense industrial technological base indeed does not have the sufficient capacities to support this, both, I mean, deliveries to Ukraine, but also replenishing our stocks that were to a large extent actually used for the help to Ukrainians. Now, this was recognized, I would say, in the European Union just a couple of weeks after the war started, and there were several initiatives. First, there is that strategic compass, which is, I think, quite good document with very ambitious set of capability or portfolio of capabilities, including strategic capabilities, high, I would say, and full spectrum, including strategic enablers that should be developed within this decade in the European Union. And then there was a summit, or Council Heads of States and Government, Versailles, in March already. And here, actually, this summit sent a very strong message in terms of the need to increase further defense expenditures, step up cooperation through joint projects, close shortfalls and meet capability objectives, boost innovation, including through civil-military synergies, and indeed strengthen and develop the European defense industrial base. And the immediate task after this was to identify what was called or is called defense investment gaps. And actually, it was a joint declaration or communication with the Commission, but the core of the task was done by us at the European Defence Agency. I should emphasize here that we are an intergovernmental organization funded by the member states and indeed also paid by and steered by the member states. So just one figure, and the financial and economic crisis that started in 2008 was mentioned as the moment, actually, where those defense investment cuts actually came sometimes very brutal. So if we look at the aggregated defense spending before and after, so the EU member states managed to get onto the level of 2007, the year before the crisis, only around 2022. Yeah? So you can imagine how deep the defense investment gap over that lost more than decade was, although actually the first sort of a change in the trend of cutting down defense budgets came after the first phase of the war against Ukraine in 2014. Defense investment pledge in NATO 2% by 2024, etc. So defense investment gap analysis, and then there were several instruments that developed to incentivize the more of joint procurement and collaborative collaborative capability development. Now, EDA, we have some experience with joint procurement. We have it even in our status that we may ask as an agency for a joint acquisition, although we are not primarily acquisition agencies such as NSD, the NATO supply and procurement agency or OCCAR. But we did some joint procurement already in the past. About 10 years ago, it was ammunition for Carl Gustaf anti-tank weapons. We do also joint procurement of services. This is also actually very important. For example, air medevac for operations and missions in Africa. And this is something that we do on behalf of the member states, contracting actually private companies that provide fixed and rotary wing air medevac, including the medical staff and equipment in operations 24 hours, 7 days. It works perfectly well, and it's about 1/3 actually of the cost if compared to if the participating, contributing militaries would have organized this. Another example is satellite communication. We provide satellite communication for operations missions, but also for Frontex and also for the EU or Commission's missions around the world. And by the way, we are ready to provide our framework contract for Ukraine. And I've been repeating this already for months. We can provide a relatively fast solution, 5-6 weeks for relatively low money, 40 million euro maximum, and to deliver actually, and it's both hardware, software to Ukrainians. Yeah. But I mean, it's upon the member states, yeah, to put the money on the table. But now things are moving a bit. So there are various examples of joint procurement, and perhaps last one, and which is really successful, and it's MRTT, it's multi-role transport tanker aircraft. And this was conceived or started at EDA about 12 years ago. And this is also a nice example how joint procurement should work if to be successful. So you start first with identification of the needs, and the need indeed was clear that in Europe actually we were and still are missing sufficient capabilities and capacities concerning strategic lift, air-to-air refueling, but also strategic air medevac, medical evacuation. So several member states met in the European Defence Agency. We provided support in terms of expertise. And the first step always is harmonizing requirements. And this is, especially if it's such a complex system, which the MRTT definitely is, then it takes some time. It took almost 2 years, I think, before we had the harmonized requirements. The harmonized standardization means the essential sort of a scheme. And then for the very procurement, because we are not procurement agency, and this is really this is a very complex project, we handed over this to OCCAR. Yeah? And OCCAR actually is responsible for the procurement. And now we have already, I think, 8 of those airplanes, and it's based on the Airbus 330 platform. Deployed in and already also operating actually from Eindhoven military air base, and we have all the 3 capabilities ready. Means medical, air-to-air refueling, and indeed the transportation of material or personnel. So it works, but what is extremely important is, and by the way, the life cycle now is being taken care by the NSPA NATO supply and procurement agency, and the capability could be used both for EU operations, NATO operations, or for some alliance of willings for in specific ad hoc situation. What is extremely important is, as I said, harmonization of requirements, then keeping actually those requirements standards throughout the life cycle. We have some very negative examples of joint procurement, and I would, perhaps the most famous is NH90, NATO Helicopter 90, which started as an attempt to have a sort of a standardized platform for maritime transport, etc. But essentially, one platform ended up in disaster because simply those participating, contributing member states were adding their specificities, and all this actually not only delayed the project, but indeed goes at the expense of the interoperability. And this leads me to the question, why joint procurement? We expect from joint procurement creating economies of scale, improving interoperability, hopefully even aiming at interchangeability within the systems and capabilities, and last but not least, strengthening the European defense industry and technological base in terms of its resilience, in terms of its predictability of contracts, in terms of indeed increasing or consolidating demand, because we often say that the major problem of the European defense industry is its fragmentation, which is true, but the fragmentation on the part of the supply is indeed caused by the fragmentation on the part of the demand. So if we want to achieve these imperatives of economies of scale, interoperability, efficiency, effectiveness, interchangeability, we always must start on the part of the supply level. So, and indeed, again, keeping coherence throughout the life cycle of those jointly procured capabilities, because otherwise we would end up in various divergences and losing actually the effect of that jointly procured capabilities. Now, last point. So, what to do now? And we are now focused on the short-term imperative of replenishing our stocks, especially in the area of ammunition and supporting Ukraine. In the mid-term, actually, we should focus on reinforcing the readiness of our military forces with, by and large, based on current capabilities, but in the long term, and we should not forget about the long term, we should also, so this is more of a, I would say, quantitative short and mid-term emphasis, but in the long term, we should also look at the next generation high-end full spectrum capabilities, including strategic enablers that would be ready also to be employed in higher intensity conflicts. Indeed, and all what we do is in full complementarity with NATO. We use NATO standards. 23 now of EU member states are at the same time allies in NATO, single set of forces, so it's very, very natural. And we also know actually and it was already mentioned here, the capabilities that might be established as a flagship projects or large projects, and air and missile defenses was mentioned. The project of the European patrol corvette, which is, I think, now being treated already within OCCAR. We also worked on some initial schemes or architecture of that. Another project that might actually be launched through us and our, we call it collaborative opportunities based on our annual review on defense. The card is focused on electronic warfare or loitering ammunition. So all this is based actually on the priorities that were defined by the member states through our processes, capability development plan, etc. So we have experience, we have instruments, we are now getting, hopefully, to getting some new incentives through what Commission does. We are part of that. We know what to do. So now it's about the political will on the part of the member states to get together and to really start consolidating and jointly approaching capability development and procurement on the level of demand. Then the supply would follow. Thank you very much.
Jiri, thank you very much for outlining that agenda around these elements of experience, instruments, incentives, and then that endangered species of political will. I won't tell you how old I was in 1984, but suffice to say I wasn't at university yet, but nevertheless it's really pleasing to have these long-standing connections to the ISS. So we'll now turn to a discussion. We've got 45 minutes, which is very good. We already have a whole bunch of questions lined up. I might take again a first group of 5 or so, and then we'll return to the panel for some reactions, and then we'll have another group of maybe 5 or so before we return again to the panel. So let's get going. First one from the UK, Tim Willesey, please. Tim.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for all the panelists. Very good discussion, and incidentally, I think the fourth very good panel we've had today. And of course, it's been very, very encouraging, really. There's been a real sense of urgency. There's been talk about learning from Ukraine, integrating AI, joint procurement, building resilience, reducing bureaucracy, and above all, of course, moving towards 3% of GDP on defense. I mean, I think you could then add in parenthesis, is this all happening 2.5 years too late, or 10 years too late if you think of Crimea in 2014. So my question really is, in the world we live in today, post President Trump's re-election, and assuming, as I rather do, that in the next few months Trump and Putin will come to some sort of deal, hopefully with some European participation, and hopefully with Zelensky's participation, but some sort of deal, and sort of knowing, as I suspect most of us in this room will suspect, that any deal will be temporary, only last a certain amount of time, how are we going to keep this sense of urgency going when so many of our political masters are going to be tempted to return to a sense of complacency and, you know, start thinking about 2% of GDP and sort of life as it was pre-Putin's invasion of Ukraine?
Tim, thank you very much. We'll take that question. We'll have a few more. If I can please turn to Robert Dalsio from Sweden. Robert, you're live.
Yes. Much of the gear we need now is neither high-tech nor cutting-edge, but we need lots of it, and we need it soon. And as I see it, the established defense industries have become like luxury goods makers. They make things at a low rate, exquisite products at very high prices. But now we need mass production, and it's very difficult to go from being Prada to being Zara. So as I see it, we need to bring in new companies that have, say, muscle memory of mass production. So I would like to ask the panel, what has been done and what remains to do to lower the barriers of entry into defense material industries and create incentives for other companies to join the established ones? Thank you.
Robert, thank you very much for that very good question and for providing a nice, succinct way of capturing the problem. That's very welcome. Next, from Germany, Ben Schwer.
Thank you. My question goes to both Minister Pevkur and to Thanos, and it's related to Minister Pevkur's B and bureaucracy, because you provided some solution on the money side, but you didn't talk so much about the solution on the bureaucracy side, because we all know what the problem is. And my question is, what, if any, sort of a national or even multinational initiatives can we think of? Do we need a NATO target, akin to the 2% when it comes to bureaucracy, or what can we do to address one of these big elephants in the room to make progress? Thank you.
Ben, thank you very much. And from France, François Isbourg. François.
Thank you. Bastian, you're a really young guy. I'm an old guy. I'm actually old enough to remember the golden age of joint projects, which was very much during the Cold War and during the 70s, even more than in the 80s. And I've been wondering why it was the golden age. If you look at the list of, for example, French-German projects which came to fruition, the list of the 60s and the 70s is much longer than the list of the 90s and the noughties. And the same is true pretty much across the board. When in those days time did not matter terribly much. The war was cold, and we were all operating, including the Soviets, from a generation to generation standpoint. So there was time. Now we do not have time. And Jiri, I'm glad that you mentioned the question of the relevance of joint projects. And you pointed out why they are relevant, in which I accept interoperability, economies of scale, consolidating defense industrial base, and so on. But what if they are not relevant? Well, first of all, the costs of development are higher in cooperation. And back in the 70s, there was an empirical law, and it hasn't changed since, which was that the development costs increased as a ratio which was the square root of the number of participating companies. You can figure out how that can add to the cost. Not a great idea. And the same applies, although without the same exact clarity of an empirical law, that also applies to the time. Cooperation, joint projects take more time. And then you get to situations where you not only have failures, and one which was mentioned, but that's normal. I mean, you have national projects which fail and some which succeed, and it's the same with cooperative programs. What is much more embarrassing is when you have nothing. And I look at, UCAVs, UAVs were mentioned at one stage. I think it was Athanasios who mentioned it. Turkey produces excellent medium, long-range drones. So does Iran, so does Israel, so does the US, so does China. I think France and Germany are in the third round of trying to develop one over the last 25 years. Maybe we'll get there in 25 years. That is embarrassing. And yet, we have in the European Union a system which financially rewards projects which have many partners. It's one of the principles of the funding by the European Defence Fund. You have to demonstrate that you include so many countries, etc., when the number of countries may be totally irrelevant. And the companies in Turkey and Iran, in Israel, the US and China are not cooperating. They're doing it on their own. Maybe cooperation is not of the essence. Maybe it's not interesting. And maybe we should revise the standards whereby we use public European money to fund programs and to do this on the basis of a review of the merits or the absence of merit of suspending funding to the multinational nature of the program. That's my suggestion, and I'd be interested to have the reactions of those like you, Jiri, who are at the coalface. And what I'd like others, I'd say this was a fantastic panel, by the way. It's really good. Thanks.
François, thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe let's take that group and return to the panel, since there were some rather interesting points in there. And but you know, you're on my list here. Don't worry. I'll get back to the next group. But maybe we can get a first set of reactions, Minister. I'll start with you. Maybe you can pick up some of these points. In particular, of course, you were asked, how do we get to less bureaucracy? How do we make that happen in practical terms? You might also want to say something about making it easier to enter the sector. The more Zara, less Prada argument that was made, and any other point you want to pick up on. You might have views on the effectiveness versus efficiency of cooperation as well. Minister, why don't you take those, and then we'll come to Thanos and then to Jiri.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you all for these interventions. I try to reply and echo very quickly. First, there was a question about the momentum. So I truly believe that it is about the leadership, and it is about there is an amazing book written by Brett Zakaria, which is the Freedom of Future. Oh, sorry, Future of Freedom, and there is one specific sentence, and where he says that the politics is the question to lead or to follow. So when you're only following, so then we're ending up where we found ourselves in '91. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union, somehow we thought that Russia will be a normal state, with whom to cooperate, with whom to trade, etc. Reality was different, and since that, because in Cold War time we had 4% in NATO as defense spendings. Starting from '91, we dropped to 1.5%. So it's not about the 2014, as was mentioned, that maybe we are too late, that we should have done that since 2014. Estonia has 2% basically from 2008, from Georgia war, not from Crimea. And the point is that when we are not acknowledging that we have to invest also in the future to fill the gaps, etc., then it's about the leaders. When everybody is sniffing only the wind, that the voters are saying that the price of the beer is more important than freedom, then we will have 1% in defense. So this is the case. So it's all about the leadership. Now, regarding the price and Prada, Zara, all these fancy Ferraris and all that, so I remember from a long time that there is a saying that in the world there is a 3M rule. This is marine, military, and medicine. So when you have everything or anything to do with that, you have to pay for the pillow 10 times more. So you have a pillow from ordinary shop or magazine, you will buy it for €5. You go to buy a pillow for your yacht, it takes €500 to buy a pillow. So this is just to understand that also the military is one of the fields where we have multiplied the expenses. But I truly believe that, and this brings more so to the bureaucracy and joint projects and all that. I truly believe in free market, and I truly believe in freedom in economy. When you give the freedom to the people, to the companies, they will give you the solutions. When you say that, when was mentioned, Jiri was mentioning the helicopter. So when everybody is saying that I want to have this and I want to have the button 5 centimeters to the left, not to the right, then the price will go up. So just take the hammer. Hammer helps. And this is the point. That keep it simple. And we see also in Ukraine today that the high-end products are nice to have, but they will not help you to win the war. At the end of the day, you need something which fires the bullet and keeps the enemy away. So this is why, and I also say that, in one moment when the bullets are over, every weapon will be a throwing weapon, And you just need to keep it simple, because you might have 10 soldiers who can handle the high-end products, but you don't have 10,000 soldiers to handle the high-end products. You have to have max 5 days, or you can have max 5 days to train people with some equipment. And now, last comment regarding the bureaucracy. Again, I remember one example from mighty Great Britain, that there was a story, I remember it was the 16th century or 17th century, that there was a guy who wanted to go to have a patent or license for the knitting machine, to have the hats from the machine. And the union of knitters said no. And then he went to France or Belgium, and he got this license. And after that, all the hats came from there, And the point is that, that when we are setting the rules ourselves, when we are saying all the time and bringing the new regulations, then again, I will bring this to our attention, that freedom of economy is something. Less rules you have, better quality you have, and quicker products. So speedier process, etc. So when there would have been a regulation for phones or smartphones, probably we would not have iPhone. So today we have iPhone, that there was an idea, and some guy came up with that. So as Steve Jobs said, that people don't want to know anything before they have not seen that. So, and again, it's about the leadership. So as long we have deep state preparing all the regulations for the politicians, and they are accepting this, then we have more regulations, then we have bureaucracy.
So thank you very much. And I suppose that's the point that has come up a couple of times, for an adjustment from a peacetime mindset to the times that we live in. And that applies, of course, also to bureaucracy and regulations and procurement processes. Athanasios.
So, 4 quick points I would like to make. First of all, when it comes to defense industry, we are not a good example, because we allowed our defense industry to atrophy. Now we're taking steps to change that. We are modernizing our ammunition production factories, working with a Czech company. We have reopened our 2 main shipyards, and it's embarrassing that we allowed a country like Greece, with its merchant marine and maritime presence, we allowed those shipyards to go bankrupt in the first place. But then it's also a cultural thing. It's still difficult to accept that this young guy who's not wearing a suit and a tie has something interesting to say about innovation and defense technologies. So we are still struggling with that. I suspect it's not only a Greek problem. Hopefully we'll manage that at some point. Available money. The only answer that comes to mind is more bang for the buck, or the euro. And I think we can only achieve that with economies of scale. And that's actually the idea behind those flagship projects. It's not about the EU paying for what its country is going to buy, but about the EU supporting research and development of new systems, and then countries get together and buy as a larger number of systems, so that the price goes down for each one. About Francois, joint projects. Well, one thing that did not gain much traction was the multinational force on nuclear weapons. And this is interesting because there's talk about what happens if the Americans, the question was asked earlier, do not provide that umbrella anymore? Should the Europeans do more about nuclear? Then the old dilemmas about who pays and who controls will come back. But then I take your point about various countries, some of them friendly, others adversaries have done much better. Of course, it will be difficult to convince Greece to buy a Turkish system. We're not there yet. But yeah, we need to do better in that sector. About maintaining the sense of urgency. Now, of course, back to 2014, we said, message received. We did a few things, but not enough. Then 2022, again, message received. We did more, but again, not enough. Now 2024, or at the latest, early 2025, there will be a new message coming not only from the other side, but also from our transatlantic side. Now, hopefully, we'll decide to do enough, not just more, but enough. But then, the big question is, can we convince our societies to sacrifice a bit more of our comfortable way of life to achieve two important objectives? One is to manage the consequences of climate change, and that means changing our way of life, both sides of the Atlantic, and then be improving our security. And I obviously don't have an answer on that question.
Thank you so much. Jiri, over to you. And you have the enviable task of explaining why we're not in the golden age of flagship projects yet, and how you will get there. So, over to you.
No, excellent questions, and I will indeed start with François because it's very challenging. And no, we are not in the golden age because we still don't feel, or most of our political leaders, the urgency of collaborating. And this also leads me to the first question, whether we will be able to keep the sense of urgency, provided that there might be some sort of a solution between Russia, Ukraine, Trump was mentioned, etc. I think that actually it's not only about preparing or strengthening the defense and deterrence against Russia. And by the way, Russia will stay here with us, and we see how aggressive Russia could be, and there is I would say, very dangerous dynamics now in the Russian, I would say, strategic mind, military mind, industry, political class, etc. So Russia will stay with us. Trump actually will be another element. I remember when I was ambassador to NATO, the first mini-summit 2017, a few months after he actually assumed the function, and he came with a very strong message, 2%, now I can imagine that there will be something like that, perhaps March next year, NATO, and he will come and he will say at least 3%, ladies and gentlemen, now, otherwise, and then another sense of urgency or element of urgency indeed is the fact that, and I mentioned it I think yesterday, we should be in the EU strengthening our operational autonomy, supported by a strong European defense industrial and resilient industrial base, because simply, and again, this will be also, I believe, a message from the next administration. We will here look, you Europeans, you should take care of your backyards, of your problems, Middle East, Sahel, MENA, the whole region, etc. Because we actually are looking at more and more at Asia Pacific, and indeed, I believe that Article 5, collective defense, NATO, will be here. But at the same time, there will be expectation that we actually would be taking care of our near neighborhood or whatever more independently. Now, back to François, irrelevance of of the projects. I mentioned a really successful project that MRTT, which is complex, really complex capability, but started a very small group of member states. Then several other actually joined this, and it works simply. It works. It delivered relatively in time. And it's efficient, effective, but as I said, what is extremely important is to stick to the set of standards and to the requirements harmonized in the beginning. The moment the various national specificities starts to be included, then this is the way to hell. I have another good example actually, and I'm glad that Estonian ministry is here. And it's a project which started under the, what was that, EDTIB, which is, EDIDP, European Defence Industrial Development Program, which is the precursor now to the European Defence Fund. Yeah? And it's a project led, it's a cluster of about 12 companies from 10 member states. The volume of money, something like 30 plus million euro, led by Estonian medium size company Milrem, and it's the project on the unmanned ground combat system. And Milrem is producing the platforms of various kinds that are, by the way, also already deployed in Ukraine. But it's not only platforms. It's the whole architecture of command and control. I visited the company, and I asked them, and it's 150 people, not more, yeah? Including production, but mostly engineers. And I asked them, and then I saw the cluster where of those 12 plus companies, where I saw already also Nexter and some other primes, yeah. So I asked them how it comes, and it's also the question about the bureaucracy, yeah, because very often we hear the complaints about the administrative burden and all that. So I asked them how it comes that this kind of company is able to manage such a complex project with so many participants, primes amongst them, etc., combining command, control, architecture, platforms. So how many people actually do work on this? I was told 3 people, 2 project managers and one system architect. Yeah? So it is possible. It is possible. Yeah? So yes, and the question on the mass that we need rather than high-tech now or cutting-edge capabilities, we need mass. Indeed, we need mass, and I refer to that short and, let's say, mid-term, but at the same time, we should not forget about high-edge, high-tech supported capabilities for the future, yeah. Because if you look around China, especially, I mean, mass is one thing, but at the same time, means the quantity, but the quality is also extremely important. And how it comes that we cannot ramp up fast and massively our defense industry is because we are not investing sufficiently and in predictable in terms of a long or mid and long term way. Yeah? This is what we hear from the industry since actually the discussions about ramping up started. What we need are safe contracts for mid to long term, and now the safe contracts means it must be public money, yeah? Because they have still, we discussed this yesterday in terms of ESG, the environmental, social, and governance criteria. They have still problem accessing the private capital, but at the same time, I mean, they need demand. They simply need a safe, predictable, long-term demand means contracts. And yeah, okay, that's it.
Thank you very much. We'll return for a final round of questions. I'll take a group of 5, and Jiri, since you mentioned it, according to ISS data, as I said yesterday, the difference between what European members of NATO currently spend and 3% is $279 billion a year, just so that people have that order of magnitude in mind. And given that I'm talking about money, I will turn first in this round to Fenella McGurty, the ISS defense economist. Fenella.
Thanks, Bastian. And just to echo the comments, I think the comments from the panel have been refreshingly honest and frank and with the issues, but also the potential solutions and ideas that can help. For a question for Dr. Ntokos, I think I found your point about the procurement process being more transparent, but coming at a cost in terms of the process being slow and inflexible. How do you think it could be speeded up without risking inefficiencies or less than perfect results? And will that last, as we've been discussing? Will it have long-lasting results as well? And perhaps as a follow-on to Minister Pevkur, in the example you gave of speeding up establishing that production site, what challenges did you face doing this? What worked to overcome them? What risks were involved? And do you think, again, that it could potentially be a faster process in future because of this? Thanks.
Thank you very much. And we will next turn to Willem Collin from the European Commission. Willem.
Thank you. We are just a few weeks away from the second commission of Ursula von der Leyen, which is bringing first ever Commissioner for Defense and Space Industry. This is a testimony of, let's say, how we have evolved in the European way of thinking when it comes to supporting defense and space industry especially. I mean, using this really special occasion, what would be, also given the discussion we have just had, and many, many thanks for that, what would be your top recommendation to the new Commissioner for Defense and Space? And what would be also the recommendation to do and not to do, also given the context you have just described? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next from the UK, Tom Waldron. Tom.
Thanks, Bastian. A couple of questions for Mr. Sedivy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but PESCO launched late 2017. A lot has happened since then. Does PESCO need to change in any way to make it more attractive, to make it function better? And I also thought it was very interesting what you said about the links between the EDA, the NSPA, and OCCAR, particularly in light of some of the things or concerns we heard in earlier sessions about, duplication and things like that, where actually here we're talking about actually quite a positive relationship between different organizations. Do you think there's a lot more that could be done there, and are there things that could happen to help facilitate that kind of cooperation? Thanks.
Tom, thank you very much for those. And from Poland, Marcin Telikowski. Marcin.
Hello, actually I have one question to Mr. Ntokos and one to Mr. Sedivy, maybe starting with Mr. Sedivy. On game changers, are we, in terms of European defense, because we have seen, Tom just mentioned PESCO, it was meant to be a game changer. We have plenty of projects not really adding up to the overall defense capacity in terms of not changing, not providing the sea change in the military capacity in Europe. We have the European Defence Fund functioning for quite a while. Again, important work, incentivizing cross-border cooperation consortia, but still not clear way how it could improve the gaps which we discussed earlier. So, and of course now the upcoming EDIP, the big funding. What is the reality that we will finally, within the European Union, have a game changer, initiative, a concept, an instrument which will help us actually address the capability gaps? Do you see the recent initiative with the European Defence Commissioner as this game changer, or because I'm hearing that the figures for the budget can be quite low? So yeah, just if you can share, are we up for this kind of sea change, as I said? And to Dr. Ntokos on the European Air Defense Initiative, that's a bilateral kind of a Polish-Greek letter calling for making this, let's say, common project for the future, for, as you mentioned, coalescing the European defense industry, but is there any actually idea on how to achieve it? What is the Greek, at least, had like to learn a vision of how this very diversified by its nature project could actually help incentivize the changes, the structural changes in the EDTIB? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last question we'll take before I return for responses and concluding thoughts to the panel from the UK, Ben Berry. Ben.
Thanks, Bastian. I became an ISS student member in 1977. Now, that's relevant to my question, because since then, European nations have produced some really good equipment. You could call it golden equipment. Equipment so cost-effective, it's sold itself. And examples, the Brits produced excellent artillery and mortars, Rapier missiles, Harrier jump jets, all of which they sold to the US. Germany, the Leopard 1, and particularly the Leopard 2 tank. Sweden, the CV-90. France, the Scalp missile. And by the way, most of those things I've described are in service in Ukraine. So am I right? And if I am right, what does this tell us? What has been the magic ingredient? What are the success factors? And why does this not seem to be happening much now? I wonder what the panel thinks of that proposition.
Excellent, Ben. Very good question. So look, we'll return for some responses here, but also any concluding thoughts you want to offer, and then we will wrap up. Minister?
As the time is running, so I try to be brief. First, pros and cons, what we have seen with our process of speeding up the planning process. First, actually, I don't see any cons. I only see pros. Because basically what we did, we put different layers to the same process. So when you have to do the environment assessment or natura assessment, you do these together. And the same when you need to do something regarding the project planning, you do it on the same time. You just put different layers on top of each other, and then you can spare some time. But still, the European requirements are there. So basically, when you just take one project into pieces, then you can see that where is the speeding available. But normally, you know, most of the time goes to that you have to argue in the court with someone who finds some ants or eagles, you know, somewhere. And this is really difficult, and the environmental restrictions are really difficult to overcome. But it is possible, and I urge you know, also the other ministries in Estonia to look into that, how we can speed up the processes in planning, in project approvals, in licensing. For instance, we are in the parliament. I went into parliament to change the gun law in that sense that when you have to deal with explosives or with you want to produce some weapon systems, then you have to take different licenses. So I said that no, we will take one. So we put them together. Government proposed that to Parliament. Parliament will approve this next week. So again, we asked from the industry that what do you need? What are the obstacles? What are the challenges? We changed that. Secondly, I will just echo on the suggestions or comments to the new European Commission. We had a meeting with Andris Kubilius, who will be the Defense Commissioner, and we agreed that we will send our view on the new white paper, because the Commission will come up with a white paper on defense, and we will have Baltic-Polish view into that. So there will be a lot of good suggestions. I really do hope that the Commission will take into account these. But first, of course, execute this 500 billions. It's not easy. This is the toughest task. Secondly, again, about the bureaucracy. Thirdly, joint procurements. So to put it very simple, but of course it will be longer. And my last comment today is very simple, that we have one amazing Estonian company also in the room. So defence Italianus is sitting there, so and they are proving on daily basis how you can basically do things on a very, let's say, in a simple, innovative way, which can help on the battlefield. So they are heavily in Ukraine today. They are doing amazing stuff for Ukrainians together with Ukraine, and bringing those lessons learned from Ukraine to everyday business. So when somebody wants to talk to him, how he's doing that, so approach him. And regarding that, I always say when I meet with someone from the industry that, not always, but sometimes I say that, when you want to have the Swedish quality with German accuracy, then come to Estonia.
Excellent. Minister, thank you very much, and thank you in particular for giving some very specific examples of what can be done and where some of the solutions might lie. Thanos.
Geopolitical Commission, number 2. Actually, my answer, I will try to combine 3 questions about what should the the new commissioner do, a game changer, and then how do we implement the sort of air defense dome idea. There are, I think, 3 main problems when it comes to joint projects. One is that we have different priorities and different threat assessments, and they all saying where you stand depends on where you sit is true for many European countries, and let's face it, there are a number of free riders over the years. So we have to come up with an idea that is of interest to everyone, or almost everyone. Then the other problem is mainly for countries that have big companies that produce almost the full range of military equipment. There's obvious competition, and the question arises, why should we choose Italian technology and not French or German or? And that's not an easy problem to solve. Now, my recommendation to the new Defense Commissioner, pick 3 flagship projects and start working on them, and that would be air and missile defense, space capabilities, and unmanned vehicles. What not to do, don't create any new committees. We have plenty of those. And then specifically on the air defense and missile sort of shield, I think the idea is not to choose among existing equipment. This is what the Sky Shield initiative is proposing to do. So let's decide that we need X number of IST and some TE and whatever else, and buy them so that we pay less. But then the air defense proposal is about the next generation, so the EU will support research and development, and then European countries will decide what to do with the new systems. Not easy. It's a new idea, but I think we need new ideas.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those thoughts. In case anybody's interested, my recommendation to the new commissioner will be to attend the next ISS Prague Defense Summit. But Jiri, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bastian. So, the question comment concerning the past and 1970s and 80s and the strong defense industry and good systems, equipments, excellent equipments being produced here in Europe. And indeed, it was different time. It was Cold War. It was and the imperative of the Cold War, the need to keep very strong collective defense, a high level of investments. Also, I think higher share of the I would say national ownership in the defense companies and all that. Yeah, so we still have in Europe excellent actual examples of high-level equipment systems. But the demand is always, leading all that. And if we look at the proportion of what the European defense industries are selling in Europe and outside Europe, it's about 50 to 50%. There was some figure actually used by the Commission that it's 78% is being contracted outside Europe. This is a wrong figure. Yeah? Well, it's not wrong, but the methodology. But if you look at the combination of export, import, and also the internal trade, I mean, within the respective member states, you get to the around 50% of the figure. So it's about demand, it's about urgency, and it was not only the consequences of the global financial economic crisis that started in 2008. Indeed, it was 1990s peace dividends. Yeah, so it's actually almost 30 years of low demand. Yeah, which okay, so. Then a game changer, and whether it would be European Defence Fund or whatever, or the new 500 billion euro, I doubt actually that member states would agree to give 500 billion euro sort of a ticket for 10 years without actually having any clue now for what. Yeah? So we'll see. So I don't expect any kind of game changer in terms of revolution. Yeah. What we see is evolution, so far mostly sort of a bottom-up, step by step, stimulated from the top. But I don't think that we will have a game changer. And the position of the defense commissioner, who will be responsible not for defense policy, but for defense industrial policy consolidation and sort of a promotion of the existing, by and large, existing instruments. And I briefed him, and actually I would say my message, and also after reading the mission letter that he received from Ursula von der Leyen, which is very ambitious. Yeah. So my main advice was listen to the member states, because in the end it is the member states who own in sovereign way defense and will own and will keep defense. So you cannot go against the will of the member states, and indeed listen to us, the European Defence Agency, and to what we do in terms of with member states or member states through us in terms of prioritization or setting priorities for capabilities and having a good track record, in collaborative projects. PESCO. Need to change, how to improve it. First of all, PESCO was originally conceived as sort of exclusive club, yeah, some sort of avant-garde. But then in the Lisbon Treaty, it became sort of a public club, social club for everyone. And when the project started to be defined, it was sort of a beauty contest. Yeah? It was not about the quality of the project, sometimes not even about the relevance, but about the numbers. Yeah? So now we have about 70 PESCO projects. We have fourth wave now. And the problem is that there are some overlaps, that some projects are simply not feasible, are, I would say, useless. Yeah? So what we are now trying to do, and we do every year a strategic review of PESCO, and this is what we've been actually promoting for years, that we should not shy away first of stopping some of those projects if they are not relevant or not delivering, or merging projects that are in a way either that have the synergetic potential or are overlapping here and there. And there was a question on our sort of, it's not, we have administrative arrangement with OCCAR, and very well defined, it's called transition document. It's a defined, very well defined mechanism of handing over projects that we do in the upstream to the downstream to OCCAR. With NSPA, it's a different story because it's NATO, and unfortunately, we don't have, EDA doesn't have a security agreement with NATO / NSPA that would allow us exchanging any kind of classified information. And it's blocked on the political level. We are now trying to do something with that, but I'm quite skeptical. But what we do with NATO colleagues at large of various divisions and with NSPA as well, we have a lot of staff-to-staff consultations. So we know who does what. We are trying to avoid duplications, to build the complementarity. We are also single community. Most of my colleagues at EDA had some time in NATO. I worked for NATO for 10 years, actually. Yeah. And we do, and this last point, with EDA and SPA, OCCAR, we are meeting the general manager at SPA, the director general of OCCAR, me. We are meeting, I think at least 2 times per year, rotating. You know, it's once it's in Bonn, then it's Catalan, or it's in Brussels, having extensive consultations, then lunch. So we know each other very well, and we are really enabling this kind of still by and large informal, but it works. Yeah, it works.
Thank you very much, Jiri. Thanos, you wanted to have a 10-second final thought, yeah.
Yes. Well, Europe is seen as having soft power, not enough hard power. We're doing things, but the perception is not changing fast enough. So we need to send a strong, credible message that we are back in the hard power business, which is why we need to have a system that flies, sails, dives, or whatever else in the next few years to send that message.
Thank you very much. That concludes our 4th plenary session. And before I invite you to join me in thanking our speakers, let me just say that I thought it was a fascinating panel, and really I'm very pleased that we had 4 very strong panels throughout the day, a lot to digest and take in, but I think it was an extremely productive way to spend our day. We will see most of you tonight, hopefully, at the dinner that we're hosting at the gorgeous Zofin Palace. Very worthwhile going, not just for the food, but now we have a short break before transport leaves for the dinner location. So may I ask you to join me in thanking our speakers for a really fantastic panel. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.